Let me share my screen.
Okay, let me just do an introduction.
Okay, sure.
So, hi guys, this is Elixir Kenya. We're having our first webinar today, and it's all about Elixir Phoenix. If you're new to programming or you're new to Elixir, Phoenix is like the framework for Elixir, the language. So, what we're going to be looking at is a module called LiveView. It's a Phoenix module, and that's what Jack is going to be taking us through. So, if you have any questions, you can either post them on the chat box on the right, I think, or you can ask them at the end of the webinar just to prevent interrupting her thought process for the time being. Yeah, that's all. So if Jackie is ready, she can share her screen and then we take it from there. Thank you.
Okay. I'm ready, and let me share my screen. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Elixir Kenya. So today we'll be hosting a webinar about Phoenix LiveView. I'll be your host. I'll be taking you through the discussion, and my name is Jackline Kaunda. I'm a software developer at Kodi, a software company based in Kisumu. And so Phoenix LiveView has been there for quite some time. It was officially announced last year by Chris McCord, and I know some of you have used it to do amazing stuff. Yeah, some of us have used it to do much of our client jobs. Yeah, and we initially used to do it in Git, but now it's finally out as an Hex, so you can use it as a dependency. And also they have published their documentation, so all the resources are really out there, so we should see them, we should check them out and try to use them. So Phoenix LiveView is a library which provides rich real-time user experiences with server-rendered HTML. It's stateful in the server with bidirectional communication via WebSockets. For quite some time, people have used JavaScript, and majority of the frameworks built on JavaScript to be able to get the rich real-time user experiences, but which is majorly built on the client. But Joseph Alim thought it might be wiser to do it on the server side. So we'll see how he attains the rich real-time user by the end of this session. During his speech, he said that Phoenix LiveView enables you to write your code without really having to write a JavaScript code. So you'll be majorly writing the Elixir code, but few of the JavaScript code. The JavaScript is a little bit minimal, but there is JavaScript because Phoenix LiveView is built on top of JavaScript. So we'll see there'll be a section where we'll have to write some JavaScript code so that the client and the channels can be able to communicate. The client and the server to be able to communicate. So currently with Phoenix LiveView, you do not have to learn all the current trending frameworks for JavaScript like React, Angular, and Vue.js. But instead, you just have to focus on your Elixir and to make good code and good real-time applications. So this enables us as Elixir developers to just use whatever current resources we have to maximize the time we have and the resources to get the best out of our applications. So Phoenix LiveView is built on top of channels, LiveX, and JavaScript. So these are basically the let me see, the systems which the systems which were used to come up with Phoenix LiveView. So channels have been there since the beginning of Phoenix. They were the first systems to be built, and then the Phoenix framework itself. So the beauty of channels is that they use WebSockets, which ensure bidirectional communication between clients and the server. So in this case, for example, the client can be a browser and your server can be a normal Phoenix server. So the time you send a request is sent to your server, the channel will process it and send a request to your browser, and it will be in real time. Yeah. And the second element is LiveEx. So we have used EX for quite some time now in Phoenix. That has been the template which majority of the people use, and Joseph Alim came up with an engine which would be used to do diff tracking for the components of an HTML template. So LiveEx currently it's used to render your template and also be able to help you do diff tracking. JavaScript is also a major part. It plays a major part in Phoenix LiveView. If you check a file called phoenixliveview.js, it has all the scripts which is needed for the whole Phoenix LiveView to attain the real user experience it requires. Okay, so I'll move on next to Phoenix channels. So we have said that Phoenix LiveView is built on top of channels. I'm sure some of you have used Phoenix channels to do a couple of things, and I was reading a blog sometime back where how Phoenix channel came about was because Chris McCord was coding in Ruby and he wanted a chat application system which will help him be able to build a real-time chat application system, but in Ruby he couldn't really do it. So he was spawning processes which are similar to the Elixir processes, and he really couldn't get notification. And also he wanted an application which many users could connect to the same node and without crashing at all. So with all those challenges, he thought of coming up with channels, and channels help us solve the issue of connectivity. So channels ensure that you have a real-time communication between your client and server, and also you can have so many connected. Sorry. Okay. Sorry for the interruption. I'll just continue. So Phoenix channels are built on top of channels, and with channels you can have so many connections to the same node without the application having to crash. So Phoenix channel begins its life at the endpoint where we define our socket using the socket macro, and we specify the path which will be matched by any incoming request, and it will be redirected to the Phoenix LiveView.socket module. So in our module, we will define our channel using the channel macro and specify the topic which we'll want any message sent to match to. So in our case here, I uplifted this code from Phoenix LiveView. So currently they match, the topic is LV and any other subtopic to it. So in case of any message with this topic will be matched to this channel, which is Phoenix LiveView.channel. Okay. So at this point we have our channel up, and the next thing is a Phoenix LiveView process is found. An interesting bit is that when you're setting up a channel, it usually attaches itself to the socket that has been initialized earlier. Okay, so how does the whole Phoenix LiveView work? The first thing we do is to mount to the DOM, which there are a couple of ways which Phoenix LiveView uses to mount to the DOM. So the first one is by using your router, and by using your router, using the live macro and defining your path. In my case, I wanted my path to be messenger, defining a LiveView module where you will have all the functionality for your LiveView application. The next way you can use it is via the controller. So when you use the controller in your router, you just use the normal get, put, post, and patch methods, but when it comes to your controller, you use the live render macro, which is different from the live macro which is used at the router. Then you use the incoming requests, and you define your LiveView module and the session you'll give. So at the session point, you provide the data that you'll need throughout your session. So if it's maybe user params you'll need during your session, you'll have to indicate that during my session I will need this for me to use it during my session. And the third method is templates. So you can also use templates you can also mount to DOM at the template level using the live render macro. Also give the incoming request, define our LiveView module and the session data that we want to use during our session. In our live module, the first thing we do is we want to mount our data. So mounting our data is basically getting all the data that you need and putting it in your assign. So if you have to get data from database or an API or somewhere else, it's basically get all data and assign it into your assigns to be available in the socket. And the next thing is that data will be passed on to render function, which will be used to send a response in form of a template back to the client. So in rendering, you can either render the template or use the sigil LEX and define your template at that point. So it will just be compiled and to a normal HTML page. So the life cycle of a Phoenix LiveView, it basically begins as a regular stateless HTTP request. And so we have our GET request messenger sent to our server, and our server will get all the data we need using the mount function and then pass all the data to the render function. And in our render function, we'll send back an HTML response back to our client. So this ensures that we push all the data that we need at when the application is booting up. So by this point, you just take all the data that you need to you, which will be needed in your browser, pushing it down to the browser so that it will be rendered at once. There's an interesting fact which he said is that once you push down the data to your client, it's basically split into the dynamic and the static parts, and they'll be stored in a cache that will be reused during updates. And the next thing which happens is a stateful mount with a spawned LiveView process. After we have pushed our data to the browser and after we pushed our data to the browser, the next thing we need to do is the client will connect to the server via WebSocket connection. So at this point, we use some JavaScript code to do that. So if you check for the people who have done Phoenix LiveView setup, there's a part where we do some JavaScript code of connecting the client to the server. So this is a point where we connect the current WebSocket we have to the server that we'll be using. And when we connect the client to the server, we spawn a Phoenix LiveView process, which calls the mount function, gets all the data it needs, the render, and then passes to the render, and then we then send back an HTML response to the client, which is the browser. With our stateful connection, the only bit remaining is how will the system do the updates. So in case of an update which happens maybe when an event is triggered, so the message will be sent and the WebSocket will receive the message, update its own state, and also render the template. So the process is quite simple to understand, and by using WebSockets, the fact that WebSockets is able to update its own state, maintain its own state throughout the cycle, it helps really do the updates really well. The LiveEx template engine, which was the creator of Elixir came up with. In his mind, he wanted to create something which looks similar to the current existing Phoenix and also attain his goals that he wanted. So he wanted to be able to do the initial rendering of a template and also to track differences in the content of an HTML page. So this is an example of the LEX. So it uses the sigil L, and this is a sample of code which is rendered to the browser. When it's rendered to the browser, this code is divided into two, the static and the dynamic part. So for example, with the time is basically a static part which will never change in that page. But when you look at the at time with the assigned time, it's a value which changes with time, and it can be value 1, it can be value 2, it can be value 5 anytime. So that's assigned to it's more like a dynamic value. So they split the two content of the HTML page. So this is a sample of how it's done. Once you render, you'll find that it will split the content of the HTML to be two parts, the static and the dynamic part. So for example, if you put your at time to be this value, my example is where you are, so it will be allocated as where you are. This is also an interesting feature when you're rendering, which is the fingerprints. So fingerprints they use like an identity for each template which you render. So if you have so many templates, you will notice that each template has its own different fingerprint. So if, for example, I'm sending my template from my server to the browser, it will have to check for another template with the same fingerprint, and if there's an update to be done, it will be done on that template and not any other templates. So LiveEx is used mostly for performing diff tracking. So how diff tracking happens is it's the dynamic section is majorly the part which does the diff tracking. So all the arguments which are dynamic are split into arguments. So if you have like 3 arguments, the engine will check among all the 3 arguments which of that argument has changed, and it will be the argument which will be sent back as a dynamic change back to the client, and the client will zip back whatever it has in its cache and bring up a whole template back again. So it's able also to track static and dynamic contents. And yeah, on the first time you render your page, we also use LiveView to update our static and later on update also our own dynamic contents. So there's an interesting bit about how do we, after having our updates, how do we really update them to the DOM? So Phoenix LiveView uses morphdom.js to update, to patch the updated content to the existing DOM. So it uses real DOM, not the virtual DOM, unlike other JS frameworks like React. So it's a lightweight module for morphing, and yeah, it uses the real DOM rather than the virtual DOM. So it's basically, it helps you update whatever content you want to the existing page that you have. And with that in mind, I want to do a short demo of Phoenix LiveView. Okay, so it's a little, not really a little, but it's an interesting to do app I did. I'm just I have not yet hosted it on Heroku or AWS, but with time I will. So I have my server running up, and sorry. Let me just run. Okay, so this is a sample. This is my to-do application. So basically, it's like a normal to-do app that you use. So you just put an idea that you want to do for that day, and it will just save your idea, and you can come and review it later on. So for example, I want to write that today I want to do, what do I want to do? Maybe webinar? Call Linda, okay. Sure. Call Linda. Okay, and then I add, then it will be my topmost to do that I'll come to check and see that, oh, I'll have to call Linda today. So it's an interesting thing to do. I did it with very few lines of codes. I didn't do much, and you can see that it has, when I finish typing my to-do, it immediately updates on my list of to-dos down here below. And just a little thing to so if I want to check my current WebSocket, which is this one. So no, that one, my bad. What happened? Oh, okay. So I'll check that, and once, let me enlarge my screen so that you can see. Once I start typing in Linda, not call Linda, message Linda, right?
M-Pesa Linda.
M-Pesa Linda, sorry. So you'll see that we have this event which has been handled. If we check, it's a render event, and this is the topic which is being sent. So it uses the first part of the topic is an LV, which is the standard topic used by Phoenix LiveView, and another subtopic which really they don't care about it, so it will match any of that. So if you understand pattern matching, you'll understand how it will match with a different subtopic to it. So this is the message which I send, and this is the content. So basically, Phoenix Live is so transparent that you can actually see what's happening. You can see the dynamics is the content which I typed in, and pardon? Oh, okay. So you can actually see the dynamics is the content which I typed in, and it is the one which is loaded back at this point. Yeah, so that's a beautiful Phoenix LiveView that we have. You can check that this is the lower part, which has a list of everything. So it's assigned to my current socket. So we have from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. So this is like the whole, everything is assigned to the socket and it's sent back to your browser. With that, I think I will take any question from now. Okay, so Mila has a question from the chat box. Last time I used LiveView, it was while it was on Git. Would you mind showing your code sample for this? And is there a guidelines to migrate for the Git version to the Hex version? Okay, sure, yeah. Let me share my screen. Sorry, I'm hoping. Okay, so type. Okay, so this is I use Sublime Text. So how Mula, you had asked about how to set up a Phoenix LiveView using GitHub. So you can see in my mix.xs file, I'm currently using the GitHub version for it. Sorry. What did I do? Just that. Oh. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's clear.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, so at this point, I've still not yet migrated to the dependency itself, but I'm still using the GitHub version for it. As you see, it's Phoenix LiveView GitHub, this. But if you want to use the dependency, you can just remove this and use the dependencies like the other dependencies, like the Phoenix one or the pub sub dependency. It's current in the GitHub documentation, so you can go check it and you'll see how it's done. So for my code, pardon?
Can follow up about that. So like there's no big difference, only that the location changes. Because I thought that with the package, things like because bootstrapping for it was actually quite heavy work. Like copying all those things to like whatever they're doing, it was hard work. So it means that with the package, with the Hex package, there is like you still go ahead to copy all those things around.
Yeah, I have not really transferred any of my applications to the dependencies, but I'm hoping that's what it will really do. But once I try it, I think I'll reach out to you and let you know how I've done it.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so much of my code base is I want to begin at my router where I defined my routes. So I defined using the live macro, then I'll use my default route and defined also my LiveView module. So at this point, I really don't need the controller because the work of the controller is kind of merged to whatever the LiveView module is going to do. So search to do live.tx. So this is my live module. So the first thing I do is I will get all my to-dos. At this point, I have a little bit of a different function. So I'll call this function, check all my to-dos, get them into my assigns, and call the function here. So at this point, I'll get all the data that I need. And then that data is pushed down to the render function. And then I will render a new HTML, which is my template, which will be used to pass all the content to it. So in my new.html, okay, so I have 2 sections. So the first section is a section that I use to add a new to-do, and the last section is the section which I show all the list of my to-dos. So this is a form that I used. It's a normal Phoenix form. Actually, the good thing with ELIX is you just use the normal function that you used to use when you're doing an EX function. So there are a lot of, it's really not hard to learn if you're really used to what's currently happening. So I'll define my form and my normal text input, and so this is the text input where I add my to-do, and when I'm submitting, I'll add, when I'm submitting, this action will be triggered. So in Phoenix LiveView we have events. So when the button will be clicked, the PHS submit event will be triggered, and there's a callback which is really has to be invoked, which is handle info. So when you check in my to-do live, I have this function. This callback will be called once that event will be triggered. So it will pattern match with the first argument as add, and then it will just create a to-do and return a no reply. Yeah. And then basically this is the normal, might be normal to me but not to everyone, but this is how you do comprehensions in a normal EX, which is basically the same on how you'll do it in an LEX templates. So I hope Mula have answered your question.
Yeah, that's clear. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So without any question, our session was supposed to last for 30 minutes, and we are really in time, just that we have 3 minutes. We have spent 3 minutes more. So without any question, I think we'll have to wind up the session. Thank you, everyone, and hope to see you soon on another session.